Okay. All right. We're recording. Hey, welcome back. I'm back. I made it back. I hit the record button. Oh, man. That was hard. That was really hard. Welcome back to another RCwithAdam podcast episode. Kind of a video podcast, I guess, this time. I'm testing out Loom, the app called Loom to record this screen and everything. So this is kind of just, we're checking it out. But man, I tell you what, as usual, I want to start things off with a word of encouragement because that always helps me too. And man, oh man, pressing the record button to start this podcast episode, like every single one, is like super difficult. And but I made it, and I'm here, and you can make it too. And so if that's something that you have a really hard time with, I just want you to know that I have a really hard time with that too, with like actually doing the things that I think of and actually like, starting, maybe it's, recording yourself, putting yourself on camera, or maybe it's, somehow putting yourself out there, teaching somebody something or whatever, or just executing this vision that you have of how you want something to go. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Because trying to get myself to do that is like, it can be super hard because there's always some reason to put it off and to just be like, okay, I'm going to start that, but you know what? I got to go get a drink of water. Oh, you know what? I really need to fix the lights that are, behind me. Or, you know what would be really cool is I should look up blah, 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 blah. And just like anything to, I guess it's basically just anything to put off actually doing the thing, which is just incredible. Just incredible. So if there's been something that you've been putting off, just do it. Just do it. I can't believe Nike took that line. So now like you can't help but think of Nike shoes when you say just do it. And then it sounds trite and it sounds like, oh yeah, it's just a tagline for a brand, it doesn't really apply, but it does apply. So I'm just want to encourage you because I'm feeling some stress and anxiety right now in my chest. My muscles are contracting. That's how it feels sometimes when you're about to maybe talk to people. maybe you have that kind of sort of anxiety or stress, or you are. I think recording stuff is even worse because it's like recorded, like. Whatever dumb thing you say is going to be recorded. And as I'm doing these podcasts, I am essentially expecting it to be one take, although I will still stress out about making a video, even though I know that I can edit it later on. And then sometimes I'll stress out about the editing it. And then, something funny is I was looking at my several previous videos. I was looking at like some of the analytics, which is something to, not spiral down on, but it can happen. But I was noticing how like a lot of these videos that I did in the last few months, I put so much work into them, like probably too much work into them. And in terms of views, because that's kind of an easy metric to use, is like nothing, like barely, let's say under 1,000 views, but sometimes like just a couple hundred views. And again, it's not good to look at everything in terms of views. And I'm specifically I'm kind of talking to my YouTube people, my creator people, content creator people. Maybe it's Instagram or social media or whatever, but don't it's not good to just focus on the views. But it does make me think, like in some ways it's almost a freeing thing when you look at that and you're like, oh shoot, like I put in hours and hours of work and stress over something that really wasn't even, like very few people even saw it. So, there's a lot of ways you can look at that. You can look at it like, well, I guess I shouldn't really worry that much about making these videos because not many people are going to watch them. That's one thing you could do, which is kind of good to an extent. The other thing is you can kind of say, okay, well, maybe, so it could be that those videos are awesome, but for some reason nobody saw them. Maybe it was a bad thumbnail. Maybe the algorithm was being mean to you that day that you published it or something. But that it could still be a great video, and it just so happens that nobody saw it. But either way, it kind of makes you think, maybe you don't have to stress so much about what you're stressing about, and that's like, I say that, and that's why this podcast thing feels kind of like meta, not like the meta that Facebook stole, but I mean like meta as in talking about itself, because, like even me saying this right now, I'm talking to you and we're having like this one-on-one, even though I don't know who you are or where you are or if anybody's going to watch this, right? Like I'm making this podcast video and maybe no one will watch this. And so it's funny because on the one hand, I'm like so stressed about it, and I'm like, I'm so nervous, and I'm like, I'm going to say something, and like, I don't know. But on the other hand, I'm like, who even cares? It doesn't even matter. It does not even matter. So that's, I don't know. I guess most importantly, what I want you to know is if you are feeling really stressed or have anxiety about that kind of thing, you're not alone. Even people who get on camera like me and act all, wow, we're going to do this thing, which that's not really an act. That's just another way that I am. But even me, I can have a very much different personality. That's kind of, it kind of gets edited out, I guess. And probably should get edited out in that sense, because it's like that's not what I'm trying to convey to you, I guess is what I'm saying. So you know what? I was going to check and make sure that my microphone thing was working right, but I'm sure that it is working right. And I feel like that's just another excuse to be like, I'm going to pause this and then like redo it or whatever. But I'm not going to redo it. We're just going to keep on going. Again, and this, so what I'm trying to do, I guess, is like, I'm trying to do this for myself, but also like for you, so that you can kind of, I don't know, I guess have an example. I don't know how good of an example I am, but an example or somebody you can point to and be like, oh, well, look, he's continuing to do something that he's not great at, or that he doesn't, always know what he's doing, or it's, it can be stressful or something, or induces anxiety, but then he does it anyway. So I don't know, hopefully that can be encouraging to you. And I feel like there was something else I was going to mention about that, but maybe I'll think about it later on. You ever notice how news people, like, why do news people talk like that? Like, why are they like, well, it seems that there was a steamboat full of kittens in the river. And, could your drinking water be poisonous? Find out tonight at 11. And just, I don't know, like, why do they have to, I don't know why they talk like that. Not sure what's going on there. I'm sure there's a very good, interesting history there that would make a very good, interesting YouTube video or something for somebody to do. So anyway, yeah, I get this feeling, it's hard to describe, but I get this feeling that like, that I need to be making this video. So if you are somebody out there and you're like, yeah, that like really helped me and I'm glad you made the video, let me know. I mean, you could just not let me know and I'll just keep making them, but let me know, because that would be cool to kind of confirm that or not, because I don't know, I get this feeling, and that's kind of the idea with this podcast, is it's not, it's like, I guess it's kind of going away from the idea with the videos, the videos that I do, where the videos are kind of more specific. They're more like a topic, or like, this is how this video is going to help you, or like, this is the point of this video. And it's really like, feels like very, I don't know, there's more pressure, there's more pressure. It's like the difference between having a business meeting or doing like a business pitch or something versus just hanging out, having lunch, right? Something like that. It's kind of like the after hours, if you will, or the off hours or something like that, where we can just kind of hang out and talk and say stuff, and we don't feel like we have to like, say our thing in this many seconds, and otherwise you're gonna walk away. Like, I mean, if you think about it, like that's a pretty bad relationship. If that were like how everyone was, like how people are, and if people are like that in your life, you should probably get some new people, people who are just like, you're talking too slow, like blah blah blah. That's called being impatient, and is not a very good trait to have. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. So it looks like we're about 10 minutes in. Now's probably a good time to transition to talking about some other stuff. Maybe some more fun stuff, maybe some more RC related stuff, and just kind of geek out here. We're going to nerd out a little bit. So I believe it should be showing up on the screen right here. So this is Craycle. Craycle, let me move myself to the bottom right of the screen, I think. So this is Craycle. This is a company that makes 3D printed airplanes. And I mentioned them in a previous podcast, and I'm working with them to print the planes and do build videos. And so right now I'm actually working on the Craycle Cub right here, as you see. I think you can see it on the screen. So it is, and I'm going to try and describe everything that I see, because this is supposed to be a listen-only podcast as well, or viewing optional podcast. So they have some really cool 3D printable airplane designs, and they have some wings. They have the Ranger V2, which is kind of like a pusher trainer style, kind of like a like a Bixler airplane. And then the Craycle Cub V2, that's what I'm building right now. I have it partially assembled, and I'm filming the build video for that. And this is so it's essentially a cub, like a Piper Cub. It's really cool. They have it set up so that you can put a FPV camera in there. I mean, it's designed, to have an FPV camera mounted in there. It looks really good. I'm printing it with yellow 3D Fuel PLA Plus Tough Pro. PLA Tough Pro, or whatever the name is. I can't remember. It's a long name, but it's their pro, their super duper PLA filament. And these are surprisingly strong, like very, very strong. And most of the like the skin sort of the aircraft is one layer of filament. And I'm very, very pleased with how well it's turning out. I'm printing it in the Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon, and again with the 3D Fuel filament, and it is like probably the skin feels kind of like a milk jug. That's kind of like the texture, or I mean that's like the kind of the thickness level. So I think I'm gonna make some videos coming up here, just showing how durable the 3D printed airplanes can be. Now, I haven't flown one and crashed it yet. Now, crashing it, that could be a different story. Especially based on the design and the geometry of the aircraft. But in terms of just like the general like feel of it, it doesn't feel like it's going to crack. Like it feels very, very durable. And assembling it has actually been really enjoyable as well, actually, except for the part with the servos. Servos are always a pain for some reason. And also partially because the control rods for the servos, they were like too short, and I'm pretty sure that the number that they give is incorrect for the length of the servo rods. I think they said 210 millimeters, and it really needs to be like 230 or maybe even 240, but you definitely want it to be longer, and then you can trim it down later. And then using those little easy connectors, which are like a little it's like a little swivel. How do I explain that? How do I describe that? I don't know. Look it up. Different companies make them. I'm blanking out on that company that makes them, but there are some different ones. Basically, it's essentially a way of connecting the control rod to the control horn using a metal set screw, essentially, to hold, or grub screw, you might say, to hold the control rod in place. It's funny, describing things can be very difficult sometimes, and I think it's definitely a practice skill. It's definitely something that you have to kind of practice, and you're like, interesting. And that's where having a big vocabulary comes in, which is pretty cool. So anyway, that's been my experience with the 3D printed airplanes. Actually, really, really good experience with it. And then using the CA glue, or essentially crazy glue, the whatever CA stands for, cyanoacrylate, something like that. And that's been working surprisingly well. And I was a little intimidated by that because I really hadn't used that stuff. And then with the accelerator that you spray on there, and then when it comes in contact with the glue, it dries really, really quickly, which makes the build actually pretty quick. So if I had to build another one, it would be way faster. And maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'll just build one to show. Well, I guess I already filmed the build process, but in any case, that's pretty cool. So I've been working on that, and then I'm probably going to do the other models coming up as well. Now, speaking of, no, I don't really have a transition for that, but something else I've been thinking about. For some reason, it has just been like stuck on my brain that I like this project of building the ultimate waterproof drone, waterproof and floating drone for use over water. I just feel like there is not a very good option. There are no, Okay, let me rephrase that. Maybe what I really mean is there aren't any perfect options, and I'm sort of chasing this, this unicorn FPV drone for water idea. So anyway, I'm working on this right here on Onshape, because in my previous podcast, I was talking about how Onshape is, I'm switching over to Onshape. So I'm going to be using this to kind of, work on this design. So basically, I'm just playing around with this. I've got this sketch in front of me here. And again, I'm going to try my best to describe things as I do them and look at them. But I thought we could kind of go over this and just kind of play around with some ideas and just kind of talk through this. And, of course, this comes, again, with the fear and the risk, which they're really not real. It's just in my imagination of like somebody's going to see this and steal my design, right? Like, how ridiculous is that, right? Because like we just talked about, probably no one is going to watch this video. And probably of those people, no one who watches the video, which it may be a few people. And if you do watch this, like, that's super cool. I appreciate you. Leave a comment if you have listened this far already, because that's pretty cool. Your dedication speaks greatly of you. But anyway, the point is, we all have those imaginary fears, and I think that those, I'm not sure where exactly those come from, but it's basically something that stands in the way of progress. And so it's like, yeah, I could be like, oh, I don't want to show this yet because, I don't want people to see it or to steal it or whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. But maybe if you show it to somebody will leave a comment or send you an email with a really good idea of a direction to go or a feature to add. And then you wouldn't have thought of that. And then it turns out that you sharing it, and at the risk of somebody stealing it or somebody or whatever, somebody making fun of it or something, then if you actually share it, then it will actually happen. But if you don't share it, it will not happen. So that's a little life lesson there for you. Yeah. Oh, I remember what I was going to say, and we're going to get to this in just a second. But I remember what I was going to say earlier. I was going to say that sometimes like doing this podcast thing, sometimes it's this like underlying thought or feeling that I'm like wasting time, by doing the podcast. Like I'm wasting time, my time maybe, or your time, like if you're listening to this or something. But the thing is, like, yeah, you do want to be respectful of people's time, but at the same time, it's kind of like spending quality time with your friends or family, right? Like nobody wants to be around that person who has everything scheduled, or like, or you say like, hey, you want to, come over to my house? You want to do this thing, or you want to help me with this project? And they're like, I don't know. I don't think it's worth my time. Like, is it going to be worth my time? Give me a 30-second pitch to tell me what we're going to do to make sure it's worth my time. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. You just spend quality time with somebody. And so I guess I feel like maybe this could be kind of like that for somebody who doesn't have those people to spend that time with, or at least those people who are interested in this kind of stuff. So anyway, so that's kind of what I'm trying to shift my way of thinking, and maybe even just enough so that it just gets me to actually hit the record button and actually make this happen. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay, cool. So what I'm looking at a sketch right now. So my latest version of this, my latest idea, is essentially, instead of doing a quadcopter where we have like where it's kind of symmetrical and we have the flight controller in the middle, well, basically everything in the middle, like the flight controller in the middle of the body or the frame, and the battery underneath or on top of that, and then the video transmitter either in front of or behind the flight controller stack. So and then you have kind of like arms that are typically symmetrical that all lead out from that center point, and then maybe the frame extends a little bit, like the middle frame plate extends out so you have the camera sticking out. So what I'm thinking about is getting away from that idea, because what I have in my mind is essentially that we would have flotation closer to the. Essentially, the idea is that what I've found is that in terms of the flotation, it's very difficult to get the drone to balance properly when it's in the water, and it's very difficult to get it to like balance upright in the water. So what I'm thinking about is not even trying to get it to balance evenly when it's in the water. Although if I could, that would be a bonus. And I mean like balance, in like a normal, all propellers are above the water kind of like position, horizontal position, if you will. And so that's very difficult. So I'm thinking about essentially making one side of the drone more balanced or more buoyant, and then probably the rear half will be heavier and less buoyant. And so what that should do is essentially make it so that how would that work? But essentially the most important thing is that the electronics and the camera and the antennas would be up top, above the buoyant area. So essentially they would be floating ideally above the water, so they would not be submerged, because you have a lot of problems when things get submerged, because there could be additional water pressure, which causes the water to get into something that would be otherwise waterproof, or I guess water resistant. And then the antennas, that's a big problem that I found out as well, is that the antennas will quickly not be functional, and you will lose connection with your drone and with the video feed when your antennas are underwater, or even if they are like sticking out of the water a little bit, but then you might have waves or swells, and that causes an interruption in the signal, because it does not penetrate very well underwater. So that's kind of the idea. So one thing that I want to play around with, so I have this basically top-down sketch. It's a rough sketch right now. But essentially I'm thinking about having 7-inch propellers in the front, and then having the electronics and probably the GoPro, the camera mounting area, essentially in line between those two motors, and basically in between the two motors, and then I'm not sure if they're going to be mounted like horizontally, like normal, or sorry, yeah, horizontally, like flat on the plate, on the frame plate as like a normal drone, or if it should be mounted vertically, so that when the drone is in its floating state, then the electronics are horizontal, and then potentially they would drain faster that way. So there's a lot of different ideas that I'm going to play around with. And again, I want to encourage you through this, like, to just go do your projects. And I'm telling myself this, like, just go do it. Go do a rough draft of it. Like, just get something out that you're like, okay, maybe this will work, and try that. Because, man, I need to well, I'm one of those over designers. Maybe you're one of those people as well, where like you add fillets to everything, and if you can't add fillets, you add chamfers, and you'll do it to everything. You'll put chamfers on chamfers and fillets on fillets, and then it'll be like just one little part of something that's like not even finished, and then you realize, and then 20 hours later of designing something, and then you're like, oh, yeah, this part won't work at all. We need to completely redesign it. And you're like, dang, I just like made it all pretty. And I was like super, smart, because I was like, oh, I got a phone call. All right, I'm going to pause the phone call. Pause. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So like we were talking about, I'm thinking about doing 7-inch propellers in the front, and then maybe smaller 5-inch propellers in the back. And the battery is going to sit somewhere aft, so somewhere behind or aft of the flotation, so that when it goes in the water, the battery and the two motors in the back will help to essentially act as a ballast, or like it'll sort of stabilize the drone in that way. But again, this is all theoretical, so I need to actually like do some stuff and then like test it out and whatnot. But this is, I enjoy this stuff. This is what gets me excited. This is like literally what like gets me up in the morning, is figuring out like new cool ways of doing stuff or testing out new ideas. And that's, some people, like, you're going to come across a lot of people who are like, oh no, that's dumb. Just, if they didn't figure it out already, then there probably isn't a better way of doing it or whatever, but just ignore those people because they're stupid. Cause, well, first of all, it's just fun to like design things and try out new ideas and test things out. And then the other thing is, you don't know what you're going to stumble across. Your idea might work, or it might not. And then, but in the process of doing that, you found some other sort of design or a cool way of doing something that actually works well, and you can use that later on. So you just don't know, what you're going to get from it. But if it's something that you want to do, you should just follow through with it and do it. So, and then the latest idea, and then we're going to wrap up soon. The latest idea that I had was, I was thinking about how do we add like buoyancy to the front of this while impacting like the aerodynamics and flight performance the least amount? Well, first of all, we need to do like a bunch of different testing and stuff. But in the meantime, I just had it, in my mind of like what I would do. So one thing that I was considering is having a, like, let me, so I'm in this sketch right here. I'm going to actually extrude. I have these circles to show that where the motors are going to be. I'm going to extrude the motors, and I'm going to say, let's make them, 25 millimeters tall. That's fine. I just need to be able to see where the motors are. So I'm going to click OK. So now I have these cylinders basically to represent the motors. And one thing I was thinking about doing was doing another sketch on the, I guess it would be the right plane is what we'll do. And then we'll get our sketch, new sketch. Oops, wait, did I do that? Did I do that? New sketch. Oh, yeah, on the right plane. Okay, gotcha. So then, sorry, I was getting confused here. So I got it worked out. All right, so now that I know where my motors are, what I was thinking is I would do almost like an ellipse, possibly, in order to create. Because by the way, I'm considering how this would work 3D printed, because I'm thinking about that as an option, especially after especially doing the 3D printed airplane and realizing how durable that could be. So what I was thinking of doing was essentially like doing like a line, I guess, where the motor would mount, and then I'm just going to do a really rough sketch, and then so there'd be like a line to where the motor could mount onto it, and then there would be an ellipse. And I don't know, I'm still learning this, so I don't know if I have the right tools or not to do an ellipse. Oh, I see. Okay. So I'm trying to get an ellipse shape here, but I'm struggling. But the idea with this is that I could have an ellipse, and it would be a good shape that could be 3D printable, because, well, depending on the orientation and everything, but it would be more 3D printable than, just say if I just did like a rectangular kind of shape to gain that volume. Because really what we're after is volume. We need air, and we need trapped air in order to make this thing float, is basically what we're talking about. So I am going to, I'm not going to play around with this because it's not very interesting in terms of a listening perspective. But that was kind of my thinking with this would be to do an ellipse and have it be that shape, because I think the 3D printing could be a good option. And then the question is, also like how buoyant does it need to be and all that sort of stuff. And then also an ellipse, because if we did a circle, that I don't know how, aerodynamic that would be either, because you definitely don't want it to go from narrow to wide, because that would be even worse aerodynamically speaking. So yeah, there's like I need to figure out a lot of this stuff, because it's much more kind of like 3-dimensional instead of the typical mostly 2-dimensional setup of a quadcopter frame. Most quadcopter frames are essentially flat, like flat pieces of carbon fiber, and maybe they're stacked or maybe they're connected in other ways, but they're pretty much flat, whereas this would be a bit more kind of 3-dimensional and that sort of thing. Anyway, our time has come to an end. I got to wrap this up, but hey, it's been fantastic spending time with you, getting to talk about some stuff and work on some different projects, because projects are fun, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because you can learn a lot about things, about life, about yourself, about skills when you do these projects and design things. And once again, I think Onshape, if you're looking for especially for a free design software, Onshape is fantastic. Not sponsored by Onshape. Just want to let you know, because if you're feeling like that's something that you want to do, do it. Give it a try. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Make sure that you, do those things that your body and your mind are like, I know I should be doing this, but like I'm all stressed, or like, I think of all these reasons to not do it. You should probably ignore those reasons, as long as the thing that you're doing is not like terribly dangerous or illegal. I have to put that disclaimer out there. But I think you know what I mean. All right, have a fantastic weekend. I will see you all on the next one. Until then, get out there, build something, fly something, create, have some fun, and most of all, fill in the blank. Bye-bye.